Hey, Trip here. This video is about how to accomplish the in-flight checks of the terrain following radar system, the TFR system. Once you're in flight and you're going to use the system, you want to make sure, you want to know that it's going to work for you. So the checklist in the, I believe it's the -34 manual in the docs folder of your BMS folder, it gives a procedure to run in flight. It's called the ANAAQ13 TFR operation checklist. At first it looks kind of long and daunting, looks like a lot of stuff to memorize, but if you break it down into its just component parts, it really is a logical checklist to follow. I've arranged a few things. I don't do them in exactly the same order, but I accomplish and check all the components that are required to be checked. So the checklist calls for having the left hardpoint power switch on, the terrain radar on. On the ALO page, we want to set 90% of the set clearance plane that we have set on the TFR page. So if this is set to 1,000 for the check, then we want to have 900 set in the ALO. We want to make sure the RF switch is norm. And we want to come back over to the left side panel and make sure the manual TF fly-up switch is in the down position or the enable position. Alright, with that, let's take off and get airborne. You get to watch me make a takeoff. A lot of dead time here. If I knew a joke, I could tell you a joke, but don't know any jokes. Alrighty. So one additional thing that I check that's not in the checklist is I want to know that the low airspeed warning function is working properly. So once I'm at a safe altitude, I go ahead and turn on the terrain following system, and you can hear that low airspeed warning tone. You get that when you're below 300 knots. So if that's not working, I'd want to tell the crew chief, let him know about it. You get above 300 knots, the tone goes away, but you get the flashing airspeed on other visual indications until you get to 360 knots. And now your system should be fully operational. Notice that when I went to norm, it automatically puts me in the manual TF mode as indicated by this Q in the HUD. And so the things that I'm going to check are the ability of the system to let down into low altitude, possibly low visibility conditions and do it safely, have the ability to avoid terrain that I might not be able to see. So I want to know that that system works, the letdown system. I want to know that the manual and the auto TF systems work as advertised. We're going to do a bit check to check another component of the system, the ability of the system to roll wings level, not only pitch up if I encounter terrain at low altitude, but also roll wings level while it's pitching up. And lastly, what I want to know is that the autopilot override, or the paddle switch, if I depress that, it will override any of these modes that I might be in. Now, I see I'm heading toward water. I really don't want to do this check over water. It's not a over the water terrain warning correction, over the water following system. It's a terrain following system. So I want to do this over land. I have turned it on over water and it seemed to work fine, even though I had that no terrain warning that you get, or alert that you get here in the center of the HUD. It seemed to work fine, but I don't think you really want to trust it with your life to operate it over water. Alright, so that's what we're going to be checking. So the first thing I want to check is this ability to let down into low visibility. So I've got the system operating in norm. I'm above 360 knots. Everything looks fine, no faults. I start a letdown to 500 feet. As I go below 1,000 feet, or 900 feet AGL, I'll get a altitude oral alert and a flashing cue. Then when I go below 75% of this set clearance plane, I'll get a low TF warning. And then finally, approaching 500 feet, I'll get the fly up. And at that time, I'm going to override it with the autopilot override switch. So there's the altitude, there's the low TF, and there's the pull up. So I'm overriding that now with the autopilot switch. My airspeed got a little bit low, below 360. That's why the scale is flashing. And now I let go of the paddle switch, and I'm happily flying again. All right, so I know that system works. If I had to let down into low altitude, low vis conditions, I know that the system would protect me from terrain. However, I want to do a bit check, so I go to the test page, and when I hit this OSB here, it's going to run a bit check. It's going to roll me wings level. I'm going to put the airplane in about a 15-degree bank. Airspeed's low. Put it in about a 15-degree bank, 30-degree bank, and then when I hit this button, it should run the test and roll me wings level. Now when it starts to do that, I'm going to override it with the autopilot until this test is complete. So let's see what happens here. Okay, so I'm overriding, and I'm just waiting for the test to complete. When the test is complete, I can release the override switch. Now I do have some fault indications here, which are normal. That's one of the things the system's checking for. So to clear these faults, first thing I do is I acknowledge the fact that I have a fault here. I see the faults down here. This is a repeater up on the HUD. So if I hit fault acknowledge, I'll clear those faults. And so now the system's back to operating normally. Okay, so that is the letdown and the bit check. And that's done in the TF mode. Notice when I turn the system on to norm, in this case, it puts the cue in the HUD here that tells me I'm in the manual TF mode. So I know I can let down into low vis, low altitude conditions, and everything will work fine. So I'm happy at this point. I don't have to check the auto TF function. If I only wanted to use the manual TF function, I could do that. I really should have my airspeed up around 400 knots. I think the checklist calls for that, but I keep letting it get low. So, but I'm going to go ahead and check the auto TF system. I've just checked the manual TF system. Now I'm going to check the auto TF system. So in order to do that, I'm going to start another descent here. I'm going to go into auto TF by hitting this advanced mode button, and makes it active. Now you can see the system's taking me down to my set clearance plane of 1,000 feet, and then it's going to level me off. So that system works. Don't want to get the speed too low here. It's bouncing up and down a little bit, but it'll steady out here at 1,000 feet AGL. Now the way I want to test it is I want to manually forcefully push forward on the stick to go below 1,000 feet. When I get to 900 feet, again I get the indication. I get the set clearance plane 75 indication, the low TF, and now I'm overriding with the autopilot override switch. Okay, I released that, and now I'm back to manual TF. But part of that check that I didn't do, let me do it again, is I want to be able to look down at the panel on the left side and see that it goes to standby when I press the autopilot override switch. So I'm just going to do that now. I look down on the left side, it's in standby, I can turn it off, and now when I release the autopilot switch, the override switch, it puts me back into the manual mode. So I know that I can override the system with the autopilot override switch. The last thing I want to check is the bank limits. So if I put it in a 60-degree bank, I get the expected limit warnings. But you also notice that the manual TD box disappeared. When I roll out less than 60, the box comes back into view saying that I can follow the cue safely. if I go into too much of a bank, it just says, hey, I'm out of here. I'm not going to let you follow me until you roll out some of that bank. All right, so that is the system. Hope you have better luck with managing your airspeed, and I hope this helps. And trip out.